Hi, Scott. How you doing? Everything fine on your end?
Great. Yeah, Robin, I'm super pumped to be back, man. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Absolutely. I love the first one, so I was like, let's do a second one. And it's really interesting. We just talked about that that you're trying to give that vintage vibe if in your company to remember to make people remember the old times, the golden times, if you will. And so you also think that Bitcoin brings that those gold. If I remember correctly, I think you said there's a golden age of reasoning coming. Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah, I have this idea about I mean, it's not my idea, but one of the Bitcoin ideas I really love is the concept of monetary entropy. And it's the idea that inside the fiat monetary system, so entropy, it can be defined a few different ways. One way to describe it is sort of a measure of disorder or chaos. And the nature of entropy in a system is that it increases over time. And so monetary entropy is a system where an increasing amount of energy over time is unavailable to do what it's meant to do, and the byproduct of that is that the system itself makes less and less sense. And we all make sense of the world with money. It makes sense to me that then as we go forward into the world and we try to make sense of the price of an apple or how much we should be paid for an hour of our work, we're increasingly trying to go out and communicate with each other and build a civilization using a measuring stick that is sort of intrinsically itself nonsensical. And so this is why I think we're really seeing what's going on in the world today. I think that we are seeing an increased measure of disorder in the fundamental base layer of one of the tools that we all use to make sense of reality. And so talk about golden age of reason. This is like the idea that in the distant past, when we had much more order, this is when we saw the most beautiful buildings in the world being built, the most low time preference decisions being made as a group. And this is the art and architecture that you see throughout Europe from sort of the long 19th century, American independence to the start of World War I. There was almost no inflation or very minimal fluctuation in price compared to what we experience now. And I think uncoincidentally during that time was a high time of flourishing of civilization. So back to like the branding and the good old days. I was born in 1980. I'm a kid of the 80s. I had older siblings, and so the 70s stuff was very much like present in my childhood. Star Wars and Barbarella and all of that stuff. And so I do also think that within our own lifetimes now, most people, depending on how old you are, have observed this accelerating disorder in society that is a downstream problem of how money was working. It is absolutely 100% true that life was just a lot simpler when money worked better, and many of us are old enough to remember that life. And this is kind of that life of, we used to get out and ride a bike. We used to actually go to restaurants with each other and not worry about what people were doing elsewhere. We could just sit and talk to each other. We, fundamentally how we thought about interacting with the world was different. We didn't used to pay attention to the price of stocks multiple times a day. All of these things are making life sort of more complicated, more stressful, making it harder. And this is why I think what we really want to help people understand is that, among other things, Bitcoin is a tool that can provide a level of order back to human civilization by, really allowing us to plan for the future with certainty. When we can all sort of come to an agreement around the rules of how money works, that is sort of the base step for things to become simpler, for people to think about things in a very simple way. Many of the greatest stresses that we have right now, the price of desirable assets becoming further and further out of reach, your paycheck not going as far as it used to and causing you to have to have sleepless nights about how you're going to pay your bills or have the kind of life you want to have. These are all things that I think are problems that can be addressed with Bitcoin, which is really exciting. But the biggest challenge is helping the rest of most of the world understand how we get there. And so yeah, it's an exciting time, man. I think that we are seeing like among other things, tariffs and what's going on in the global economy right now. These are symptoms of the system really being ready, I feel, for a larger scale awakening or an understanding of a potential alternative solution to all these problems.
That's super interesting. I just had that one story in my head when you were talking, because when you mentioned stock prices in the charts, I had a train ride. It was around 2 hours, and I sat next to a guy who literally for 2 hours straight he looked at his phone, which is not very common. But he only looked at stocks. I mean, I only looked like 3, 4 times, but any time I looked there, he looked at stocks and meme coins, and the price of it. And it was so hard for me to ignore that, because it was so funny that for 2 hours he just like constantly looked and just checked out the charts. And maybe he also bought and sold. I don't know what he did there. But it was just so interesting for me. And the whole 2 hours, I was just researching for my book and look into the printing press and how this might relate to Bitcoin. And it was such a nice contrast of two people sitting next to each other. The one really into the meme coins and fiat world, entrenched and probably trapped into like, hey, let's make some money to like make whatever. I mean, I did not have a conversation with him. Would have been maybe interesting, but it was an interesting contrast that I experienced there.
Oh, totally. And this is like a completely new phenomenon. Like 30 years ago, people would read the paper, maybe listen to the radio sporadically throughout the day, or watch the news at 6 p.m. at night. And that was it. And people were not constantly plugged into the continual never ending stream of global events, the continual fluctuation of the price of everything. Like there are so many conversations happening like intraday about like what is going on with Bitcoin. And like, you know, Bitcoin is on its way to becoming the global reserve currency, and maybe more sooner than we think. And that's not something that's going to happen probably like inside one single day ever. So it's just a funny, we're all products of the system. We all live in this society together, and I think this is that thing, the problem of entropy and money. We're all just trying to make sense of a nonsensical problem, and so we get all kinds of outputs and all kinds of like different ways people are trying to use human ingenuity to figure out this thing that just really, I don't know if it can be figured out.
It's super interesting as you mentioned that, because I sometimes get the feedback of like, oh, like you record 2 weeks ahead of time. So like when we record this at like 11th of April, and this will probably come out at beginning of May. So it's like an 3 weeks old episode.
Yeah.
And it's super interesting because people have this need like, oh, I have to get this conversation directly and now and right when it was recorded, because otherwise it's like old news. I'm like, how does it matter? Because
Yeah.
as you said, like Bitcoin is on the way to be the world reserve asset, and it's interesting to talk about the implications and then how it gets there. But like everything else is kind of noise. What's happening with tariffs and the implications of Bitcoin, and if Trump said that about Bitcoin or not, or Elon Musk is not like it's fun to talk about, but in the end of the day, it's noise.
Yeah, totally. It's 75,000, 85,000. Like we're going to be pricing things in Bitcoin one day. And I don't know when that day is, but I know it's coming.
How much is this focus on maybe news and this constant stream of information that we are so obsessed with? How much is this because of technology? Because we have now the possibility to do that, because in the past we didn't even had phones and stuff like that, where it was able to be always connected and in there. And how much is it the broken money system and the high time preference?
Yeah, I mean it's a great question. I think they are probably very intricately intertwined. Um, the concept of 24/7, connection to everywhere in the world through a device that is you're holding in your hand most of the day is super new. And I almost think of it like how I'm in Canada. The First Nations communities in Canada were didn't have a history with alcohol, and so alcohol was introduced into their societies very abruptly, and they didn't have the same long period of time of developing the technology and having it then become sort of slowly integrated into a culture. And so that those cultures here had almost no ability to interact with that substance, and it just became a massive problem, and it still is a massive problem here. And I think the same way about cell phones and social media technology. We really have had an explosion of these things. People are using them probably, without a lot of intention or self-reflection. It becomes an automatic thing. You don't really have an opportunity to unplug if you don't want to, because this is just the nature of how we communicate now. But we are really, truly in the very early stages of trying to understand what this is doing to human connectivity, to time preference. I really think that social media has been a really catastrophic driver of diminishing our attention spans and our ability to focus. So, like we used to have to wait. When I was a kid, if there was a show on TV that you wanted to watch that was on Thursday night at 7, there was no way in the world to watch that show before 7 p.m. on Thursday, and you just had to wait. And then if you couldn't be there at 7, you'd set up your recorder and you'd watch it, and then you could watch it on your own time after. Flash forward, we started streaming videos on YouTube, and then sort of shorter videos on Instagram. It came to TikTok, and like on TikTok, it's like if you don't catch someone's attention within like 3 or 5 seconds or whatever the number is, they're on to the next video. So like we're seeing this like intense compression of attention span, and I do think it's intimately related to the way money's working. Money is a measure of energy and time. So when you have a money that is more effectively storing time, I think you feel more of an abundance of time, and you feel less pressure on how you're spending your time. So we did used to move slower. We did used to enjoy ourselves a lot more, and we didn't do things, like those kinds of behaviors probably just wouldn't have happened at that time. But now, I believe there's some sort of subconscious awareness in all of us that as the accelerating devaluation of money is happening everywhere, we all understand that our time is being devalued and stolen from us. And so, because of that, there's a fear around how we spend the time that we do have. And so, this is why we're only willing to give a video 3 seconds chance, because we maybe that 1 minute that we have to scroll some video for some kind of enjoyment has become that precious for us. It's a really sad place to be, and yeah, man, I hope we can cycle around and change this, because I wonder what the floor is for the compression of our collective attention spans.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see when we have, and Twitter is becoming more and more TikTok-y. I've seen from the attention span that the content is different, I feel like, but the algorithm is working very much the same, I think. And we talked about it that before on Twitter, like paying people in Bitcoin. How was your experience with how this changes relationships when we now exchange this fiat dollar to Bitcoin? Because on a logical level, it shouldn't change that much, but I've seen that it changes a lot, because the person behind could also just directly convert into the Bitcoin when it's the same amount. How was your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that any kind of economic exchange work is a value exchange, and when there is a subconscious understanding that the mechanism for that exchange has some kind of theft built into it, or we're using a money that we would probably prefer not to if we didn't have to. I think that that's going to influence the interaction. So it could be the purchase and sale of a good, but it especially to me applies to like the exchange of work. And so that's what we're trying to do. Block Rewards. Block Rewards is a Bitcoin only compensation and rewards software company. We're trying to build the world's best tools for paying people in Bitcoin. And our mission statement is harmonizing the energy exchange of value creation. And I think that this is really the problem that we need to fix, because um, employees continually need to earn more money because things are continually getting more expensive. That's not the employer's fault, but it does create a challenge in the relationship for people being fairly rewarded for the work that they're doing. Employers have to pay people and recognize people for the work that they've done so that they continue to work and feel excited about the work they're doing. And so that's just a difficult thing to properly accomplish, and it's nobody's fault except for the people who are continually stealing from all of us by expanding the money supply at a faster and faster rate. And so I think that I'm bullish. We talked about this offline, but I personally think that the next step of Bitcoin adoption and creating a circular economy and onboarding the next massive wave of Bitcoiners is normalizing the concept of wanting to earn some Bitcoin at work. And it doesn't have to be a situation where people are, all switching hard stop to a Bitcoin standard and they're only being paid in Bitcoin, but Bitcoin as a reward, and interjecting Bitcoin into how we think about rewarding people for the work that they do is a really exciting start, and something that I think has sweeping ramifications for companies that want to get on board with this idea, starting to think differently about how they relate to their employers, to their employees, excuse me, and how they help their employees plan for the future with certainty. Good employers care a lot about their staff and their mental health and the well-being of their staff, and they want their staff to stick around and be productive. And great companies, don't typically experience high turnover. They have motivated employees that want to come to work and contribute to something bigger. And a big part of that, that we see all the time is like companies trying to figure out how to offer their staff things that will help them feel good about why they're working where they are. And these have, in the past been sort of fiat tools like pensions and savings benefits, bonuses. There are all kinds of different things that companies do to try to get creative to help people feel recognized and rewarded. But to me, inside all those tools still exists that measure of entropy and disorder. And it's because they're just all fiat tools, and that's nobody's fault. But if you think about when I go to work and I spend an hour of my time, like time is the single most finite thing that all of us have, because eventually the one thing we have all in common is that we are all going to die. We are all going to leave this world. And so we do all have a finite amount of time. And so what we are really trying to do, I think most of us, when we go to work, is make the most of that time. So with the time that we have left, our free time, our future time when we hope to not work one day, is that energy has been well spent and conserved. And this is what really Bitcoin is offering people, but it's really what it's offering employees and employers is an ability to effectively store the energy and time that is contributed to something bigger, so that those people can do that in such a way that they feel rewarded properly and feel like they've made a good use of their time. They can live that simpler life, right? Like, this is getting back to the idea of like, this is how people used to live. And, you go way back. I had this conversation a few weeks ago with the guys from Cartwright in the UK, talking about, they're doing some really cool things with paying people in Bitcoin too. And if you go back to that long 19th century, that period of high culture in Europe, that was really like predating investing. Nobody was investing, not workers, certainly. And so what people would have done is you would have earned money, and you would have kind of had two choices with that money. You would have either saved it or you would have spent it. And anything you were probably going to save, you probably would have just, put it into gold coins or precious metals. And the purpose for that was exactly what it's meant to be. We didn't used to need to gamble half of our money or the money that we had left to try and grow it into more money, so that we could feel like we were preserving our energy and time. 100, 200 years ago, we would have just had a more effective tool for storing that energy and time. And this is why I think it's what has really become missing out of the fundamental way people think about financial planning, is because we don't have effective tools simply for saving. we've really lost touch with the concept of just saving. And even our grandparents, would have, had cash, or bonds would have been a more effective way of low risk, sort of low time preference tool for saving for the future. We need to solve the problem of being able to save, and I think Bitcoin is really this, modern Renaissance 2.0 version of a savings tool.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast, and if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.